and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Going to be covering some recent news, articles, and Common Core is one thing that I am going to probably focus on the second portion of the first half. Common Core, and when you get into talking about the youth and what we're doing to protect our youth from being used as pawns and being poisoned, you know, all the different effects and eugenics when it comes to the health of your child. You know, that all plays an effect because there are people out there that believe that there are a such thing as undesirables, and that they are so intelligent that they should be the ones to choose for people. And, you know, just like last broadcast, I talked about, I even played the clip of Bill Gates, and, you know, he talks about end of life. Should we really be spending this much money on saving older people? And that's a death panel, and, you know, it's taboo to talk about it, type, you know, come on. You have to, after that, you have to understand what these people intend to do with what they're, you know, doing out there. Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with the vaccines. Well, if they have that frame of mind, why would it be something out of the ordinary to think about that? And I kind of debated on playing this clip, but this clip's from the Alex Jones channel on YouTube, and since I talked about this last broadcast, I figured it'd be appropriate to play this. And again, we'll get into Common Core and the education of the youth, but I think it's real important to look at the way that we are being manipulated, I believe. And second half of this broadcast, we'll get into some world news and talk about some of the breaking news that's out. But let's go ahead and cue this clip up from InfoWars. And it's titled Bill Gates Foundation Eugenics Front for the Illuminati.
What do you make, though? Do you disagree with me, or what can you add about how the globalists create the crisis or exacerbate it, put cancer viruses in the vaccine, give over 100 million people cancer through the polio vaccines? That was declassified in the 80s. People can pull that up. And then they raised hundreds of billions of dollars to fight cancer but never find the cure. Fritz Springmeier, and cancer only skyrockets, up several thousand percentage points in adults, over 10,000 percentage points in pediatrics, in children. But no one dare ask why all this is happening. The answer is go jog and pay $100 to enter the jog, the 5K or the 10K, and feel good about yourself, Fritz. While you give money to groups that are carrying out eugenics and funding Planned Parenthood and gun control groups. Fritz Springmeier.
The pattern, the way the elitists work, the way the Illuminati function, they've followed a pattern for the last century, and once you catch on to it, which you have, then it becomes a no-brainer. But most people are busy, looking at the latest celebrity scandal or their football team and just sit there and absorb whatever they're told by the mass media. But once you catch on and you can critically think, you start seeing things just like you've been telling people, and that is they create a problem and then they create the solution. But what we have with those solutions is they create a banner issue. For instance, sustainable development. Who doesn't want sustainable development? So under the disguise of sustainable development, we have Agenda 21. We're going to save the land. We're going to save women and children. And then they bring their agenda behind that.
They give themselves the moral high ground. We are saving the earth and prosperity and sustainability. Who's with us? Well, actually, you want to take my property and give it to yourself. Shut up, racist.
Right. So for like the Christians back in 1992, they do Evangelism 2000, which what Christian doesn't want to evangelize the entire world by the year 2000? But then they run their agenda. And behind Evangelism 2000, what did the Christians do? They went door to door like census takers and found out what religion everybody belonged to. So they were doing mapping for the New World Order. This is the kind of stuff that they do.
And by the way, you said that at the time, and even I rolled my eyes. Now it's public. They're clergy response teams, actual FBI paperwork and CIA paperwork. Not just megachurches. Most preachers now literally go to secret government meetings and are spying on everyone, and it's even mainstream news.
Exactly. And so, like under health care, which is another banner issue, who doesn't want health care? Who doesn't want to fight cancer? So
yeah, you're not for starving children or not giving them medical treatment, are you?
So then they bring in the vaccines, and like you exposed on InfoWars, that one polio vaccine that they were giving in India paralyzed 48,000 children. And then they were giving a vaccine over there in Africa, and you exposed how that was paralyzing children. So this is all, a lot of what we're seeing is under the major agenda that the Illuminati have, and that's population reduction. Or you can give it different names, population stabilization, but the end result is they want to kill a lot of us. And so a lot of these agendas, or a lot of the things that we see happening, follow under their main goal, which is to reduce the world's population. And the ones that remain, they want to control. So you see, the second agenda that they have is mind control. So a lot of what we see happening is to control our minds. Now there's a scripture, John 7:42, John 7:24. Judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment. And, that's what you're doing. That's what a lot of other people like yourself are doing. That's what I'm doing. And that is we're setting aside judging by appearances, because if we look at appearances, like we've been discussing, I want to save the land. I want health for everybody. But we have to judge righteously. What is the truth? It also tells us in the Word of God in 2 Thessalonians 2:10, it says the love of the truth is what's going to save us, not the truth. I can hand you a Bible or I can hand you some research, but if you don't love the truth, you're just going to throw it away. And so what you've been trying to do, what I've been trying to do, is empower people, get them excited about the truth so that they love it and they want to do something about it. And you and I can hand people facts and truth and information all day long, but until they get to the point that they love the truth, it's not going to affect their lives. It's not going to save them. So this is what we have going on. You and I, we're trying to empower people. I'm trying to encourage people and trying to pull the mask off of all of these falsehoods, And the people that you're talking about, you were talking about George Soros. What I can contribute is he's Illuminati, And then the Bill Gates Foundation, you were talking about that just recently. That's a foundation that the Illuminati worked through, So where I come in to help what you're doing is that I, like you were saying, having researched the Illuminati, I come along and say, you see all these corporations, you see all these politicians, here's how they connect to the center of power. Here's how they connect to the globalists, the elitists, the Illuminati, So you look at like someone, Sir Jeremy Haywood, he's the cabinet secretary over there in the United Kingdom. He's the prime advisor to the prime minister. He's Illuminati. We have all these Illuminati people salted through things, and then we got these little puppets like Obama, that just do whatever they're told. And then, like you say, we got people like Al Gore running around.
By the way, that was an awesome puppet imitation. You just did. It looked like Team America or something. The way you did. Can you do that one more time? I like you, Gary. Incredible.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show. Weekdays.
Okay, that was Alex Jones, InfoWars clip there. And the one thing, a lot of people are like, the Illuminati. Well, Illuminati is what it is known as the little group of people. It's been called other names. Really, you have to look at it as a club of people that think they are higher than the rest of society around the world. They are better than you. That is their mindset. And anybody that has that mindset that gains positions of power are dangerous people. We understand that. And you even all have that hypocritical sense in you. When you believe that, you might go, oh, this, idiot's in my way, or, what is this, stupid person doing? But at the end of the day, your actions on how you treat people really kind of outlines, your true ideology. I might get upset at people and think to myself, oh, this idiot's in my way. No, but in reality, I do things that probably make people upset. Everybody wants to do about 10, 15 miles over the speed limit, and I'm fact, they're doing 5 over maybe if I speed. Just because I leave myself enough time to get places, and I just don't need a ticket. Don't really have a wish to spend my money that way. I'm trying to invest in new things, which try to invest in new equipment and machines. So I'm trying to put my money there and not risk a ticket. Does that mean that I'm obeying it because I'm in fear? No, it's because of financial reasons. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I could lose everything I have right now, because I don't have much. So I'm just glad that I have what I have, and I know there's people out there that hurt, and a lot of times I'll give my last, dollar up. I have no problem helping people out, and I do it continuously, and I think that betters society. But this whole Bill Gates Foundation and eugenics thing that they were talking about on here, that really gets down to that foundation, that these people truly think that they're better than you, and they have ways to try to control the masses, because they believe that, well, they're the smart ones, they're the intellectuals that should be making all the decisions. And I don't know if you've seen a recent movie, Divergent. That kind of plays into that whole well, I'm better than you, so I should be able to terminate you. And this is happening in society, and we see it through education. While they'll push Common Core on you, they'll private school or homeschool their kids the correct way. They do want a subservient class to rule over that will make the things that they can use. So while you're, this kind of seems to be history repeating itself. They want that culture of the peasants that please the royalty. And a lot of things that are going on really tend to point towards that's what they wish to do. And when you see so many things come out about the vaccines and all that, you have to really call into question, who's behind it, who's funding it. And when I look at Bill Gates, that's all I can see is someone that truly thinks he's higher and more intelligent than everyone else, and he should be able to make society healthier by getting rid of the unwanted, undesirables, as his father probably would have called it. And he definitely, in that one video clip I played, he definitely reverted back to, what my father did in his involvement with the start of Planned Parenthood, which at the start of Planned Parenthood it was very evident what their goal was. And it was controversy and, because it was racist and classist all at the same time. Poverty, people that were in poverty or of a different race were targets, and that definitely is something to be worried about. we have a society that I think a lot of people are unaware because of the whole it's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory. When evidence continues to mount. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do with their health, but I am going to tell them to look at the obvious things that are out there. There's definitely things that will point you in a direction if you do the proper research. And find out who has money in this research. You start seeing Bill Gates, you might want to run and hide. I don't know. You might love what Bill Gates talks about. You might like population control. I don't know who you are. But from my perspective, once they get rid of a certain group of people, they'll be on to the next group. And eventually your number will be pulled. And you know what? I have the 3-minute clip. Bill Gates admits vaccines are used for human depopulation. And this was a TED presentation. I've played it before. But I'm going to go ahead and play it again.
Over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to 0. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to 0. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses everything. The food we eat, clothing, TV, heating. These are very good things. Getting rid of poverty means providing these services to almost everyone on the planet. And it's a great thing for this number to go up. In the rich world, perhaps the top 1 billion, we probably could cut back and use less. But every year, this number on average is going to go up.
In the next excerpt, you hear Gates explain what he considers to be the single most important thing that in the world that he could see.
So this is a wish.
Here it is.
It's a very concrete wish that we invent this technology. If you gave me only one wish for the next 50 years, I can pick who's president, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, or I could pick that this thing that's half the cost with no CO2 gets invented. This is the wish I would pick. This is the one with the greatest impact. If we don't get this wish, the division between the people who think short-term and long-term will be terrible, between the U.S. and China, between poor countries and rich, and most of all, the lives of those 2 billion will be far worse.
And there's some other other clips out there that really get into it too. I was trying to see if I had it here. No. Thought I had one saved, but it doesn't look like it. That's okay. But yeah, it really shows the mindset of these people. They definitely have the mindset that makes people think that they're speaking intelligently. Well, on the other hand, they're kind of playing you for stupid. Okay. We are going to be getting into Common Core. So, I did have a clip here somewhere in one of my little folders. Okay, I got a couple of them here. And some of these are students talking about Common Core, parents, but they're really speaking out for the freedom of choice of education options. You know, parents and teachers, you know, people that were involved in Ron Paul stuff back in '06. We've been talking about the federal education system, public education, and how from its really conception, it really was focused on socialized education, kind of that little marching army that everybody can be taught the same way, the same ideals, and you know, we can create a society that people think the same. And it's pretty sad what they're doing with this. It's pretty sad that there's not more people that are not opposed to this. Definitely on the left. You know, you've seen quite a bit of people on the left go against it, but this has no party line. There's no party line when it comes to Common Core. They are deliberately dumbing down students and propagandizing them. And, you know, I'll get into more of this, but let me cue up one of these clips here. And there was one speech I was going to play, but it was kind of long. I didn't want to put you through that one. But in the speech, it really gets down to what we really need to start doing. The first one, a lot of you might know, Julie Borowski, someone that's been around the so-called Tea Party Liberty Movement. This one she did, it was a 3-minute clip, the truth about Common Core. And this kind of gets down to the basics of it, which is why I'm going to go ahead and play it. But there's some other ones that really, I think, expose even more that really gets down to the fundamentals of you teaching your kids.
Public school. In this video, we are going to address the problems that is in the public school and how to make education gooder. The quality of public education has been going like this, especially over the past couple of decades. There's a lot of reasons for the decline, but a big reason is the federal government is increasingly taking control over schools. Centralizing education and one-size-fits-all policies don't work. No child left behind left everyone behind. Now we have Common Core, which is Uniform National Curriculum Standards. Remember that main principle in TV sitcoms?
This will go down on your permanent record.
Well, that permanent record is now real. There's a huge new student tracking database as part of Common Core. Huge violation of privacy, creepy big brother, data mining. I know what some of you are thinking. But it's actually a well-known part of Common Core. The database would not just include relevant academic information such as test scores, it could include information on a student's religion, political affiliation, blood type, overall health status, sexual orientation, and more. And get this, it could track a student's appreciation for diversity and cultural awareness. Let's say 6-year-old little Susie likes to repeat things she hears her older brother's friends say.
Tommy pushed me off the monkey bars. He's a...
Now, Susie, that wasn't very politically correct of you, was it? This is going in your permanent record, and your potential future employers will be able to read this. I mean, come on. Little kids, they say and repeat things they don't understand all the time. Don't let their un-PC inappropriate comments they made when they were in first grade haunt them forever. Another problem with Common Core is this kids aren't allowed to fail mentality. We have to coddle them, and it might hurt their feelings. Everyone is a special snowflake. Mathematics under Common Core is pretty messed up. Let's say a kid writes 2 plus 2 equals 5 on his test. As long as he can explain how he arrived at that wrong answer, then that's just fine. This kids are too precious to fail mentality has got to go. Is this how to prepare kids for the real world? I mean, not everyone can be a politically connected Wall Street banker. There are a lot of problems with Common Core. I don't even have time to go into most of them. But a step in the right direction would be to give local communities, teachers, parents control over their schools so they can design curriculums and standards to best meet the needs of their students and get the federal government out of education.
Okay, that kind of listed some of the things that they want to keep on the children, the information. And slowly but surely, not only is this about dumbing down your kids, alienating your kids from you by, well, 7 minus 7, well, let's turn one of the 7s into a 10, and then we'll have to, you're going to look at half of this crap and not know what you're looking at. Then, dumbing down your kids. But another thing that's being done is they're databasing absolutely everything about your child, including anything their children tell them about the parents. Daddy hunts. Daddy hunts with a shotgun. Mommy has a pistol in her purse. Things like that could be database. All this information, the state of the health of the child. Well, who's all going to be able to put input in on the state? What if the principal really, really dislikes the parents and puts in some claim that the child may be malnourished. By wording it that way, maybe. Just, oh, I thought the child was a little skinny. Maybe not weighed enough. That's why I put that in there. But then what happens as a result of them putting maybe something like that in there, we already see things like that happen. Are we going to see more of it? And will we see more of it being justified through this database collection? Will we see, this whole, well, according to your school records, you're only allowed to be a factory worker. According to your school records, you're not allowed to be involved in politics because you've been involved in activism. Or the wrong kind of activism. This one simple thing in Common Core should be alarming. That one simple thing. Now, let's turn to a teacher describing why she left teaching in public schools due to Common Core.
I would just like to say thank y'all, first of all, for giving us the opportunity. And I've traveled 3 hours to be here tonight. So I'm very, very passionate about what I do. I'm an educator. I live, sleep, eat, breathe this stuff. My lucky little 3-year-old and my husband get to hear it all the time. So, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I'm here today for my son's future, and I'm here today for the kids. I would just like to start off a little bit introducing myself. I was in a public school system for 7 years in an outstanding system. I mean, the teachers couldn't get any better, the students couldn't get any better. I loved my job for about a year or two, and I saw thousands of changes come down the pipeline. And I began to get more miserable and more miserable and more visible as I could not do what was best for kids. And that's what I want to focus on today is why Common Core is not for good for kids. I've heard people say, in previous remarks that teachers are happy about the Common Core, but then again, they wouldn't recommend their job as an IT profession. Neither would I. I have recently transferred from a public school, cut my salary in half, made some very big sacrifices for my family, because the last straw for me was Common Core. And the biggest thing for me, this is what I have an issue with. If it's the only game in town, it's the only game in town. And I know people are saying that the standards do not dictate the curriculum. If you know anything about teaching, your standards dictate the curriculum. And let me tell you the biggest reason it dictates the curriculum. Because when my evaluation depends on it and my job security for my family, let me ask you this. I want you to think about your personal children and grandchildren. If little Sally's in my class and she doesn't pass the state assessment, are you going to pat me on the back and say to me, well, that's okay, we know you're a good educator? No, you're going to wonder what happened wrong in that year, little Sally's in my classroom, what I didn't do. What's going to be tested are the standards. And when the standards are tested, that's what you spend your time on. So it's not a framework, it is a curriculum, and when it's tested, and when it's high-stakes testing, and you're getting evaluated on it, you are going to test that 100% of the time. Have you looked at the 3rd grade reading standards? I know everybody's saying that the Common Core has been condensed. Yeah, it visually looks like it's been condensed, but if you take the reading standards and break apart how many elements there are in the 3rd grade reading standards, did you know there is 93 elements in the 3rd grade reading standards? So you tell me, after teaching to make sure they pass the test, how I'm going to have time to change that curriculum. Yeah, we can get our own book list and all that's been said, but the curriculum is still the same. And the biggest beef I have about the curriculum is the age appropriateness of it. It's been called, we've got the race to the top and all this. It's the race to the middle is what it should be named. It's mediocre teaching. We have a one-size-fits-all approach, and as someone said earlier, the gifted students are going to be bored to death. I totally agree with that because I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. The other student I have seen, many students like this, are, I'm thinking of one little boy in particular, that I taught last year that was very low achieving at the beginning of the year and had made so much progress by January. No, he wasn't a high kid. I mean, he had probably pulled himself up to about average. But y'all, he was so motivated and encouraged. And what started happening in January, you come back and you get ready for that test, you get ready for that test, you get ready for that test, you push the standards that you know are going to be on there, and he hasn't mastered. When a 7-year-old has this problem on a mock CRCT, something that goes, if 27 students get on the bus at the first bus stop, 10 get off on the next one, then 3 more join, 8 more get ice cream. I mean, it was that ridiculous. You tell me how your 7-year-old grandchild or child can do that. Here's another example. If you have a 7-year-old, tell me if you've ever seen a 7-year-old that can tell you the difference between adjectives and adverbs. That's one of our standards. Tell me a 7-year-old that can reason abstractly. If you know anything about education, 7-year-olds don't reason abstractly. I'm not saying that I'm not for pushing my students, because I can promise you I am passionate about it, and I push my students tremendously, and I have very high expectations for them. But I'm fine with asking a second. I do that in my reading groups right now. I currently teach 2nd and 4th grade. And when I teach 2nd and 4th grade reading, you better believe I push them. And I do introduce critical thinking. But I'm not giving that child pressure. Get it. And I can tell you, those students, I'm telling you firsthand from 7 years, the students that do well on the test, once they pass that test and they get their little treat bag and a pat on the back from the principal, the majority of them can't remember what an adjective and adverb is. And it's not because I didn't teach it the right way, because I sleep, eat, and breathe it. I know how to teach an adjective and adverb. It's because 7-year-olds are not designed to critically think and master what an adjective and adverb is. So you've got this one mediocre standard, your high kids are bored, your low kids are doing what I had 3 or 4 of mine do last year, is leave the room and throw up, or, and this is after encouraging, you can do it, and breaking down during a test. There will be no room to teach anything else at all. And I know my time's not up, so let's see what else I got. Another thing that has been said is that, even with the math and the reading, the pacing guide is determined when we have to teach it. And all of this has been based on what? Listen, I was a public educator for 7 years. I got sick of changes. Sick of them, especially when I had no say-so in them. But we're talking about staying the course. I understand that, because there were so many years, I can't tell you the hours I spent. I didn't work 7:30 to 3. I worked about 7:30 to 7 making stuff. And thinking about it when I woke up, and thinking about it when I went to bed, and praying, God, please don't let me change anything again. But when it comes down to the kids, if you're an educator for the right reason, why are you not going to think of the kids first? Because while we're staying the course and not wanting to change anything, our kids are suffering from standards that are not age appropriate. And that's what I'm appealing to you for. I'm somebody that's sacrificed my salary. I sacrificed a lot of things this year, but I will say, and I just told somebody this on the way over here, this is the first year that I have honestly been able to lay my head down at night and say I have loved my students and that I have genuinely cared for them. They are achieving very well, and I have not introduced something a couple months later or a semester later than I did in public school, but it's like with my 4th graders right now. I'm not beating them over the head to get possessive nouns and adjectives and adverbs and critically think, because they're developmentally ready for that. We're wasting time cramming. Exposure's fine. But when we get a one-size national fits-all standard, we have no ability to change it. That will be what we test on, so that will be what we have 100% of the time. If we can't draw the line here, what else are we going to accept? And I've heard a lot about teachers today, but I haven't heard hardly anything about kids. And that's what it's about.
And that was from educator. This is what they're facing. And it's something that shouldn't really be surprising. There was one that was put out, public education has become indoctrination and distraction. And I had this one pulled up, and I think I am going to go ahead and play this one. This is truly what I believe, too. And that it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with education. It's a re-education camp, a control tool by the people in power to manipulate and use the population for their will. And with the internet out there, they need to do something in the public school to further along their plans. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. This is Rye Dawson, YouTube. And it's public education has become indoctrination and distraction.
I have no clue about what I want to do with my life. I have no interest because I saw every subject as a study, as work, and I excelled at every subject just for the purpose of excelling and not learning. And quite frankly, I'm very scared. John Taylor Gatto, a retired school teacher and activist critical of compulsory schooling, asserts, "We could encourage the best qualities of youthfulness, curiosity, adventure, resilience, the capacity for surprising insight simply by being more flexible about time, texts, and tests, by introducing kids into truly competent adults, and by giving each student what autonomy he or she needs in order to take a risk every now and then. But we don't do that. Between these cinder block walls, we are all expected to be the same. We are trained to ace every standardized test, and those who deviate and see light through a different lens are worthless to the scheme of public education, and therefore viewed with contempt. H.L. Mencken wrote in the American Mercury for April 1924 that the aim of public education is not to fill the young of the species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. That is the aim in the United States. To illustrate this idea, doesn't it perturb you to learn about the idea of critical thinking? Is there really such a thing as uncritically thinking? To think is to process information in order to form an opinion. But if we are not critical when processing this information, are we really thinking? Or are we mindlessly accepting other opinions as truth? I must retrain myself and constantly remember how insane this ostensibly sane place really is. And now here I am in a world guided by fear, a world suppressing the uniqueness that lies inside each of us. A world where we can either acquiesce to the inhuman nonsense of corporatism and materialism or insist on change. We are not enlivened by an educational system that clandestinely sets us up for jobs that could be automated, for work that need not be done, for enslavement without fervency for meaningful achievement. We have no choices in life when money is our motivational force. Our motivational force ought to be passion, but this is lost from the moment we step into a system that trains us rather than inspires us. We are more than robotic bookshelves, conditioned to blurt out facts we were taught in school. We are all very special. Every human on this planet is very special. So aren't we all deserving of something better? Of using our minds for innovation rather than memorization, for creativity rather than futile activity, for rumination rather than stagnation. We are not here to get a degree to then get a job so we can consume industry-approved placation after placation. There is more and more still. The saddest part is that the majority of students don't have the opportunity to reflect as I did. The majority of students are put through the same brainwashing techniques in order to create a complacent labor force working in the interests of large corporations and secretive government. And worst of all, they are completely unaware of it. I will never be able to turn back these 18 years. I can't run away to another country with a different education system, perhaps meant to enlighten rather than condition. This part of my life is over, and I want to make sure that no other child will have his or her potential suppressed by powers meant to exploit, his or her potential suppressed by powers meant to exploit and control.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first of them is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that, given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating? How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out, how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization? How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which is if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. Some people say we have to raise standards as if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I mean, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, you know, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and pediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? You know, boring stuff at school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, there are tests for this. One kind of cod example would be, people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? Well, those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? Does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 15? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. They've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way. It's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
And, another thing I want to add to that, though, with the individual is the individual has to be able to, follow their passions. You might have one that's passionate about science, another one that's passionate about history. And, one thing he pointed out was, there's one answer and this is what it is. When you get older and start looking at history, if you're someone that's willing to look outside the status quo and actually look at facts and seek out the truth, sometimes find out that maybe what you were taught was a little whitewashed. But one thing about that, though, is, the system of teaching a group of kids one way and judging them independently, it comes again down to, well, maybe that student wasn't quite as good at math as the other one that is real passionate about math, because this one is extremely passionate about science, which, because we have them in the same grade level being taught the exact same thing, the one that's passionate about math is not being able to excel to their potential. The one that's passionate about science isn't able to do the same. They're being held back in things that they could extremely, elevate at. And people go, well, they still have to, learn math. Well, that's not saying that they don't. But as they elevate in science, what naturally needs to come with that? Usually mathematics. All that, with Common Core, a lot of that's just shattered anyways, because now with the mathematics, the way they're teaching it, it's completely devastating some of these kids. There was a picture that flew around Facebook that a mother posted of her kid, picture she took the year before of her kid, always taking pictures apparently, but kid smiling at the camera as she was doing her homework at the kitchen table. And then showed a recent one of the kid just bawling, not able to understand the Common Core mathematics curriculum. And I say Common Core curriculum because it is based on Common Core standards. Therefore, it is Common Core curriculum. When the textbooks mirror the standards, that's the curriculum. Well, they don't have to just teach that. Well, you heard the last one. Well, when that is what everything is based on, my reputation, the children's reputation, that they have to meet these standards, that's what we're going to have to sit there and pound into them. It's not based on helping the kids out. It's really it's a complete attack at the fundamentals of someone learning. Excuse me there. It's already 7. Wow. I was going to play something. Washington Post on YouTube has a interview. I was going to play a clip of it, but even if I just play that portion of it, it's still kind of long. But I urge people to go check it out. It's full interview, Bill Gates on the Common Core. Washington Post. Okay. I do have a couple more I would like to play that are pretty short. Okay. Here's a short one. I'm going to play this one. American Enterprise Institute has it up. Bill Gates explains the Common Core. And I'm going to kind of get into this.
So what is the Common Core? It's a very simple thing. It's a written explanation of what knowledge kids should achieve at various milestones in their educational career. So it's writing down in 6th grade which math things should you know, in 9th grade which math things should you know, in 12th grade which math things should you know. And you might be surprised to learn how poor those, I'll call those standards, but to be clear, it's not curriculum, it's not a textbook, it's not a way of teaching, it's just writing down, should you know this part of algebra, should you know trigonometric functions, should you know, be able to recognize a graph of this type. And doing that very well is hard because there's certain dependencies, if you teach it in the wrong order, if you try and teach too much at once, too much too early, which the U.S. was doing a lot of that, it can be very, very poor. And if you compare, we had 50 of these things, and there was quite a bit of divergence. Some states had trigonometry, some didn't. Some had pie charts, some didn't. And so ironically, what had happened was the textbook companies had gone in and told the committees that make these things up that they should add things over time. And so we had math textbooks over double the size of any of the Asian countries. And we had the ordering in almost every one of our 50, which is strange. You'd think if you had 50, one of them would randomly be really, really well ordered. Yeah. Some were more ambitious than others. So, for example, being high, that is having the 12th grade expectation be high, there were a few like Massachusetts were quite good in that respect. And so when kids from Massachusetts take international tests or SAT, anything, they do better, better than the rest of the country. And so often when you see those country rankings, they'll take Massachusetts and show you where it would be if it was a separate country. And it's way past the U.S. that now is virtually at the bottom of any of the well-off countries, with the Asian countries totally dominating the top 6 slots now. Finland had a brief period where they were up high. Now they're not even the European leader anymore. So a bunch of governors said, "Hey, why are we buying these expensive textbooks? Why are they getting so thick? Are our standards high enough or quality enough?" And I think it was the National Governors Association said we ought to get together on this. A bunch of teachers met with a bunch of experts. And so in reading and writing and math, these knowledge levels were written down. And at some point, 46 states had adopted that. Curriculum, a variety of competitive curriculum, now that small companies can get into it because it's not just doing a book for Florida. And so the sort of barrier to entry that was created by the large firms there goes away. The idea that those committees rev it so you can't use the old textbooks, that idea will go away. Because in math, this can have real durability. Changing your math standards, it's not like some new form of math is being invented. And there has been, in a sense, a national expectation. When you take the SAT test, it has trigonometry on it. So if you're in a state that doesn't have that, you're going to get a low score. And they use a certain notation in the way they do the math. And certain states were different than that, so you're screwed. If you move from state to state,
in the vernacular,
you experience discontinuity because of this. And it's made it very hard to compare things. And this is an era where we have things like Khan Academy that are trying to be a national resource, and yet you sit down, it'll tell you, are you up to the 6th grade level? Are you up to the 9th grade level? Are you ready to graduate from high school? And so this Common Core was put together. If somebody and states will decide this thing. Nobody is suggesting that the federal government will, even in this area, which is not curriculum, will dictate these things. States can opt in, they can opt out. As they do that, they should look at this status quo, which is poor. They should look and find something that's high achievement, that's got quality. And if they can find something that's if they have two they're comparing, they ought to probably pick something in common. Because to some degree, this is an area where if you do have commonality, it's like an electrical plug, you get more free market competition. Scale is good for free market competition. Individual state regulatory capture is not good for competition. And so this thing, in terms of driving innovation, you'd think that sort of pro-capitalistic, market-driven people would be in favor of it, but somehow it's gotten to be controversial, and states will decide whatever they want to decide is fine. But at the end of the day, it does affect the quality of your teaching. Does affect when your kids go to take what are national level tests, whether they are going to do well or not do well.
Now, you see how, everybody's going to need to understand trig and be extremely well at trig. It really faces off to, they have no interest when it comes down to it in the individual's abilities in certain things. You might have someone that might be excellent at being a surgeon or engineer, or very good at design. It's so many different things that one might have a passion for farming. But instead of following passions, we have them in a system that they're supposed to learn all this different stuff. Think about how much do you remember from when you went to school? How much time was wasted on the things you never used, never remembered, but, you spent a lot of time on that stuff. It's just, it's an idiotic system, and that's why I think homeschooling and that individual, and even homeschooling, you have to be aware of where some of the passions lie with your child to be able to allow them to be successful. If they have great talents and passions for something, that's something that they should focus quite a bit of time on. That doesn't mean that they should ignore things that are essential in life, but they definitely should have more ability to follow their passions. And that's something that public school does not, and I truly don't think they ever will give the youth, is that ability to prosper. That's things that they're truly good at. It holds them back. Well, I am going to open up the phone lines. If anybody wants to talk about the education system, Common Core, homeschooling, anything that you might want to talk about, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. If you have me on Skype, you can also hit me up through there. You know, the whole education system, something I've been very vocal about, and it's because of my own experience in the public school system, and because of standards. Like one of the people said, you know, filling people up with drugs, which they wanted me to go on something, and I said no. My mom was like, he's not going to go on anything. And you know, it was one of those things where, because I got bored in class and chose to kind of disengage and do my own thing, which half of the time it was, you know, reading or following something I was passionate about. Well, you know, his scores make us look bad. So if we label him learning disabled, we could not have to count his, you know, his grade as part of the standards. And luckily, the teacher that I was put with shortly after that realized how smart I was and basically let me disengage in class. And, you know, I'd be reading a book on history or something, not doing classwork. And that was a very lucky thing that I had the ability to do, only because of that teacher I was placed with. There was a lot of students that were extremely smart that were put in these classes that the teachers would not let them disengage and, you know, further their intelligence, their education through their own means. But basically a lot of those kids end up dropping out, which my school actually kind of screwed me over on a credit, and basically credits were hidden until I retook a class, and then the class I missed, they weren't going to offer to the next year. Said I would have to take one class for 1 year to get my diploma. They weren't going to offer it during summer school. And I was like, yeah. Within a month and a half, I believe, I had my GED. Which most of those people did not get their GED that took the test. Very small percentage. Some states have really easy GEDs, some states don't. This was when they had changed the GED standards and try to make it harder, which for me it was pretty easy. Didn't have a problem. But these other kids that dropped out, they also went and got their GED, but they dropped out well before their senior year. They were just done with it. It just did not make sense. And then, of course, society kind of looks at them as an outcast. Oh, they only have a GED. What people really need to realize is a lot of these people with GEDs are probably smarter than you think. They have intelligence. They're not dummies. You know, I see so many people that they really seem to rely on, you know, I need someone that has a degree from college. Well, it seems pretty easy for a lot of these people to get degrees and not know what they're doing. And that's personal experience when you deal with a lot of these college graduates. They got this degree. They find out, oh, he only has a GED. Not knowing I did go to college, so that I got bored with too. I'm too much of an info junkie to be put on some slow regiment of teaching. I need to keep reading, what I do a lot now is audiobooks. So I'm always kind of a little bit off in La La Land when I'm doing other things too, because I'm listening to what's playing in my ear. It's one of those things. Me personally, I can't do that regiment of this is what we're doing this week. Well, I was done with it in a day and a half. This was really interesting. I want to read more about it. Oh, that's not till next. And it just, I felt like I was being held back. And just not for me. Oh, I have some articles and things coming out to talk about. I said I'd get into world news, and that is what I am going to do. If you've been paying attention to news, Putin put out some strong words. And it seems like Putin is being pushed. Now I got two quick clips that I'm going to play. First one, Putin warns a nuclear war if Russia is threatened. And both of these are from InfoWars. This one's only 35 seconds. Go ahead, cue this up.
I'd like to remind you that Russia is one of the biggest nuclear powers. These are not just words, this is real, and we actually strengthen our nuclear forces. They are more compact now, but they're also more efficient. They're more modern. They have modern weaponry. And we continue to boost their potential, and we are going to do this in the future as well. This is not to threaten anybody. This is just for us to feel protected.
Okay, and I'm playing this from InfoWars because they did a pretty good job. They cut this out of a pretty long clip, which I did not want to play. That was a response to everything going on, and a question from a youth group member or something like that. But it seems that the West is definitely pushing, trying to push for war against Russia in Ukraine. And then we have another one here. out of InfoWars, ex-CIA calls for assassination of Putin.
New headlines are going up every few minutes at Infowars.com. Be sure and scroll through the whole site. Ex-CIA official proposes assassination of Putin. In a recent op-ed, a former CIA official suggested the removal of President Vladimir Putin by assassination, if necessary, should be the primary objective of the Obama administration in its strategy for Ukraine. Herbert E. Meyer, who served as special assistant to the director of Central Intelligence under the Reagan administration, said the goal of the U.S. sanctions against Russia should be to get the Russians, who we've been keeping Putin in power, or tolerating Putin in power, to throw the knockout punch. And he goes, by that, a bullet in the back of his head would also be okay. So they're telling the Russians, kill him. Because Putin did arrest, 6 or 7 oligarchs it turned out were basically Rothschild fronts. The Rothschilds sued over the claims, and it came out in court it was true. You can look that up. Last year, the case settled. And the judge basically said, this suit that you brought proved everything against you. It proved what was claimed. So that's the big no-no. That's why they're always like, I bet Putin's got billions he stole. I bet. I'm not defending Putin. The point is that they want him out of there. And listen, the globalists might assassinate Obama, hypothetically, as a false flag to get a race war going. They got a lot of wild cards they can play. Fritz Springmeier, you agree with that statement?
Yeah, there's all kinds of wild cards, but I think that they've got their agenda pretty well under control where they're not going to have to play too many wild cards. Going back to this whole thing about controlled conflict, they're creating all of these messes, but the solutions that they give us are taking us in a direction that they want to take us. Another way of describing it is Hegelian dialectics. And,
Perfect example is Syria creating ISIS. Now we've got to go back to the Middle East because of ISIS.
Yeah, well, the United States supplied these groups that were fighting Assad. We supplied them with weapons and money, and then those weapons and money are now being used by ISIS then to become this powerful organization. So we created the problem that now that we have to go and bomb. So yeah, it's the same thing. And once you get these problems going, they kind of they morph where they're almost out of control.
That's right. They just trigger a lot of stuff, or make something that's already happening worse.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m.
Okay, and when you look at it, this is more provoking Russia and Putin. So let's poke at them a little bit more, and you have them pitting out. Russia has reportedly sent 1,000 troops into Ukraine. Well, I'm not saying that NATO really has all kinds of troops in Ukraine. Peacekeepers. Well, they've also been caught in Russia. There's a problem going on where neither side's telling the truth. And, we get called isolationists because a lot of us talk about non-intervention. So the proper term would be non-interventionist. But they don't want to say that. They don't want to deal with the outside world. It's not that. We're not isolationists. We want to deal with the outside world, just not in a military way. Everything doesn't rely on military. And this is something that needs to be spread worldwide to these other countries, including Russia. But, you start pushing at Russia and want to build bases around Russia, and think that they're not going to hold their ground. I think you're fooled. I'm going to kind of switch things right now. Ben Swann's put out, is Rand Paul the face of justice in the GOP? And I have my problems with Rand Paul. But I think if you had an option between Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and them, I think you're better off with Rand Paul. I hate to say that because I still don't trust him, but I'm going to go ahead and play this clip.
And I'm Ben Swann, filling in for Steve Malzberg. Welcome back. Well, some say that the GOP has an identity crisis right now, and that one of their big issues is reaching out to minorities and to women. So could a libertarian-leaning leader like Senator Rand Paul help bridge that gap? Joining me now is Jack Hunter. He is a contributing editor of Rare.us and a former aide to Senator Rand Paul. Jack, thanks for being on.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk a little bit about bridging this gap. Ferguson is a great example. Senator Paul was actually the first real national leader to stand up and to call for the demilitarization of police in light of what was happening there in Ferguson. But he has a very strong record in terms of really standing up for these communities that really in the past Republicans, at least in appearance, don't have a strong record on, correct?
That's exactly right. So, and I wrote a piece for this for Politico magazine or on this subject. Conservative Republicans typically, when it comes to these sort of law and order issues and where it's sort of racially explosive, involves minorities, African Americans often. We saw this with Rodney King in the 1990s. You saw conservatives generally take the side of the LAPD, who are obviously doing really horrible things to Rodney King. We saw this with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, where conservatives would sort of rush to make a hero out of the gunman Zimmerman and to make a villain out of Trayvon Martin. Now, some of these situations are complex. In Ferguson, you saw, a lot of the same thing, where some conservative Republicans did not want to give African Americans the benefit of the doubt. Michael Brown was still learning the details, but were very hesitant to give the benefit of the doubt to the African Americans who were victimized or whatever happened, and were more than willing to wait and hear what the police had to say. What we see now, a difference coming from conservative Republicans, particularly Senator Rand Paul, is a sort of libertarian approach where they're saying, no, actually the local police have weapons and are doing things that are more suited to a small army battalion than officer-friendly, the local neighborhood police, if you will. This is an over-militarization, a militarization period of law enforcement that doesn't need to be happening, and the African-American community there, no matter what we learn about Michael Brown or anything else, is right to perceive that they're being targeted based on their experience with the police, their perception of the police being this sort of militarized force. I think we're seeing a very different dynamic or narrative as far as the Republican Party goes, and libertarian Republicans like Rand Paul have a lot to do with that.
He absolutely does. Another thing that Senator Paul has done recently is he's taken on this federal prison reform, where he's really working to change, along with Senator Cory Booker, some of the federal requirements in terms of prison sentences.
Get caught with a marijuana cigarette or whatever else they're doing, and do some serious time over that and have a record that will follow them the rest of their lives. Senator Paul spearheaded efforts to restore the voting rights of ex-felons, to allow them to have guns again, 3 decades after they did their time. These are things, and you made the point that it's not racially, it's not intended to be racial, but it is racial in the sense that it is minorities who bear the brunt of these horrible policies. It is up to conservatives, if they're genuine constitutionalists, if they believe in limited government, to go beyond thinking of big government as just, high taxes, too much regulation. Actually, big government oppresses a lot of different people in this very diverse country of ours in many different ways. If conservatives are going to do outreach, they're going to have to impress upon people, especially minorities, how big government is harming them and hurting their lives. I think what's happening in Ferguson and how Rand Paul chose to address that as an example of that. I think restoring ex-felons' voting rights is an example of that. I think there's many different things that conservatives can do that they haven't been willing to do and are only now willing to do because you have libertarian Republicans with a little bit different philosophy pushing these things. I think it's refreshing. I think it's good for the Republican Party. I think it's good for the country. I think it's good for minorities.
You mentioned the restoring of voting rights for felons, and those are obviously non-violent, I believe. And you, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but non-violent felons that he's pushing for that. And essentially, we're talking about people here who, again, have been caught with a marijuana cigarette at some point. They had a joint with them, and they get arrested, and it's considered a felony because they had, marijuana with them. One of the major issues that we see taking place when we have this discussion right now, though, it does come down to the rights of the individual over the collective. And I think that in a lot of these communities, especially what we're seeing in Ferguson, the real battle there wasn't over the fact that it was just Michael Brown. It is revealing a lack of confidence that people within those minority communities have in government, and a distrust they have for police officers and for law enforcement. And I think as the libertarian streak in the Republican Party continues to grow, it stands up for those people and says there's good reason at times that you all don't trust government or you don't trust law enforcement because they're not trustworthy on occasion. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And look, the worst thing we can do as human beings, forget about conservative, liberal, libertarian, if you will, is to dehumanize people or to dismiss their concerns or their grievances as a group. For example, many of my conservative friends and my criticisms of militarization of law enforcement are saying, well, why are you, acting like all cops are bad? I'm not acting like all cops are bad. I think most cops are good people and well-intentioned, but I think they're stuck in a system, the militarization of police, which comes from federal incentives and turns them into small armies, that creates a bad situation. And that's true on the opposite side. African Americans have a legitimate beef, a legitimate grievance, that they are being targeted and treated differently from people of other races and different socioeconomic classes because of the color of their skin. The Michael Brown reaction, no matter what we learn, whether the officer was in the right, whether Michael Brown was in the right, or what we learn about that perception that led to those protests, that is a legitimate grievance that conservative Republicans have been reluctant to look at. Now that we have libertarian Republicans, and not just Rand Paul, Justin Amash is good on this issue, Thomas Massey, many others, now that we have them sort of in leadership positions, I think they're opening conservatives' eyes. Look, the African-American side of these racial conflicts, these things that happen from time to time, is not only worth listening to, which conservatives usually don't do, but they also have a point, and here's why. I think to the extent that you can explain that to fellow conservatives in language that they understand and sort of open their mind and open their eyes, I think it's wonderful for everybody involved. I think it's the right thing to do.
Well, what we've also seen, as you know, Jack, throughout the country is an issue of police tactics becoming increasingly militarized. We also see over and over that so many things that happen, we almost have within the context of media this belief that anything that happens to someone who is quote-unquote committing a crime. So if the person is caught, with drugs, well, that makes them a drug dealer. It doesn't. It doesn't necessarily. We have these archetypes that we've already formed around people, and we view them as being guilty until proven innocent. And unfortunately, because of that, many times I think what we start to see, as you pointed out, a dehumanizing of people.
Right.
But Senator Paul, and you mentioned Justin Amash right now. Justin Amash, I think, is a great example of someone who, in Congress, just won a very, very difficult primary. I mean, really got out of a situation where establishment was coming after him with incredible amounts of money and smearing him because he's a guy who simply stands up for rule of law and the rights of the individual.
I think that's accurate, and that race got pretty nasty, and you saw the old Republican establishment, that sort of old mentality, going after Amash with everything they had. I mean, let's not forget Amash, who's of Arab American descent, his Republican opponents in that primary said that he was Al-Qaeda's best friend in Congress. So you read into that race baiting or ethnicity baiting what you will, but it got nasty. And that's where a lot of conservatives are at. Look, we need to move beyond this. You talk about racial disparities in the legal system and whatnot. There are plenty of white professionals out there who have prescription drugs that are every bit as potent, or if not more potent, than some of the things that young African Americans, Hispanics, and others get arrested for. But that's legal. That's okay. We look the other way on that, or we don't even need to look the other way. It's legal. It's fine. The poor people who make a mistake with something like marijuana or other drugs are thrown in jail for 3 decades for doing things that, these hypocritical, people in other situations are also doing. We need to be able to open our eyes and to see the contradictions in our culture, the hypocrisy on all sides. And, just because somebody breaks the law doesn't mean we should dismiss them forever, especially when those laws are pretty stupid to begin with and don't make sense. The law is not always correct. We need to address some of these laws, change some of these laws, reform some of these laws. Rand Paul's doing that. Amash is doing that. I do think, with the 80 million millennials who are going to be the biggest group in this country, if you will, age group eventually in voting, I think you see a fresh, younger perspective in the rising generation that's really going to change a lot of these things as well. I have a lot of hope for that.
I think that's absolutely true. And I like to say, Jack, many times that not every law is lawful, and it's important for people to remember that. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Good to be with you. Take care.
Thanks. Well, up next, the very best of Give Me 5.
Okay, and that was out benswan.com. And, leaving off on the excessive use of force by law enforcement. I've talked about the one where, not only have we had Ferguson, but the SWAT that threw a stun grenade in Tyler's crib, now they refuse to pay for medical bills when they were raiding the wrong house. But we have another one. You can find this at thefreethoughtproject.com. Surveillance footage release shows cold-blooded killing of unarmed man by off-duty Chicago cop. The brutal murder of an unarmed Chicago man outside a Westside CHA housing project, September 7th, 2013. So this one's actually an old one, but I'm sure the footage wasn't released right away. By an off-duty Chicago police officer, Kenneth Walker has sparked outrage as recently released surveillance video contradicts virtually everything Officer Walker, who shot and killed Marion Horton, claimed happened prior to the shooting. Horton had gone to the complex to meet his girlfriend Rhonda Day in the early morning hours Saturday morning. Day had spent the night at her mother's apartment in the building. When Horton arrived, the security guards wouldn't allow him to enter, one of which was an off-duty cop that eventually killed him. Horton's cell phone had died, so he was not able to call Day to let him into the building. Horton left the lobby and urinated on near Walker's SUV. At the point, the female security guard says to Walker, "He's not effing pissing," and both Walker and the female security guard then exit the building to confront Horton. The officer and security guard make absolutely no attempt to arrest Horton. In fact, judging by the video, the only intention for going outside was to assault him. Never once do they have cuffs out or is an attempt made to subdue. The officers clearly aren't in fear of their lives or concerned that the public is in imminent danger, as the video clearly shows people coming and going from the building as they are engaging Horton. Officer Walker, during the investigation of the murder, prior to being aware that video of the incident existed, claimed that he and the security guard never initiated any physical contact with Horton. and in fact claimed that Horton knocked him to the ground and overpowered him when he attempted to take him into custody and began to pummel him with punches. Clearly, this is blatant fabrication used as means to justify shooting Horton. In fact, what can clearly be seen happening in the video is in stark contrast to Officer Walker's version of events. Walker never attempts to take Horton into custody. His cuffs never come out, and the only physical contact was actually Officer Walker kicking Horton in the chest. There are no attempts to take anyone into custody. The only time Horton gets physical is to defend himself after he is assaulted by these two jackboot thugs. Walker was simply angry that Horton urinated on his vehicle and decided that he was going to assault him as a means of revenge. Not realizing the entire incident was being caught on camera, these actions are completely unprofessional, but add in the fact that he subsequently draws his firearm on an unarmed man and proceeds to shoot and kill him. Makes one question the mental health of this officer, and it points out that he's not fit for that position. The video is out there. I thought they had it here, but apparently not. But you know, the whole thing with this is it's constantly caught on camera all the time. You know, and half of the time, you know, they don't even get fired. Ones that do, through the police unions, try to get their jobs back. And when you see protests like Ferguson, not saying what everybody was calling for was justified, but the anger was justified. But it's not just justified for a black community. It's justified for all the communities, all the people that are being affected by this. And, you know, the drug war, all this, you know. And then you have the story about, you know, the child that was flashbanged in their crib because they no-knock raided the wrong house. Now they're refusing to pay medical bills. What if, you know, who wants this? Who in the public wants this? And to those who try to justify it, what happens when your house gets flashbanged, your child gets burned, or you get hurt, beat up, house tore apart? You're not going to feel the same way anymore. And that's the thing that's happening, is more people are being affected by this because, well, look how many people they already have locked up. They need new targets. And if they flashbang the wrong house, and you just happen to have something that maybe you should have, then, well, they got someone. There's a city here, it's over in northeastern Indiana, Fort Wayne. And, well, Fort Wayne lately has been no-knock raiding homes because it could be a possible meth lab. And there was a string of these that happened that absolutely nothing to do with meth was ever found. One, I talked to the guy that was raided. The only thing that was found was a little cellophane with some marijuana in his wife's purse, which, because he didn't have money for lawyer fees, didn't know the whole, you know, anything about the justice system, he ended up having to take a plea deal. And his wife took a plea deal, which landed her in a halfway house, landed him on probation, which they just come in his house all the time now, well, where he's staying, because they had destroyed the house he was renting to the point that it was inhabitable afterwards. So now he's living with his brother, which his brother had to sell all of his guns before he moved in. That way he could legally move in. And now his brother has to deal with cops coming in all the time to inspect. And anytime he gets called to come down piss test, he has to go immediately. He's got a time limit to get there. All of this because, well, what he found out in discovery, the warrant was based on a person being caught a block away with a mobile meth lab and gave the officer a whole bunch of addresses of meth labs to get off himself. Another thing that was also that I discovered while talking to this individual is he's been going to a doctor for back problems, working 2 jobs in factories, and he's had a lot of back trouble, back surgery, and they piss test him all the time for various reasons, and they also test to see what drugs are in his system at the time. And it was actually on there that, well, they test for everything drug-related, pharmaceuticals to street drugs. And he had all the documentation. But he has to take piss tests now for the government and pay 3 times as much as what he could pay going to a doctor's office. All of this for unjustified rape. Now tell me what the law enforcement... Oh, by the way, he lost one of his jobs because of it. And his first wife or girlfriend, that they had a child together, he has to pay child support. And that's why he was working 2 jobs, to make sure child support was paid. His current wife and kids were taken care of. Someone that literally busts their butt, they work during the week and work weekends. Struggling to get by. And because some meth head wanted to get off of his charges, he just gave him a whole bunch of addresses. Most of them were in that block area. Most they found was marijuana in the purse of the wife at this one. And then at another one, they found marijuana paraphernalia. And they're doing it in poverty areas where they might have a better chance of actually finding something they can charge someone with, even if the warrant is on frivolous charges. One reason I won't even live in that county anymore. That's another thing, Allen County. You're going to allow Fort Wayne to draw people, or run people out of there. Allen County, you need to get your shit together. It's one of those things. The city is expanding so much that even when you move out of the city, within a couple, 2-3 years, you're under threat of being annexed by the city. And it's getting to the point where people aren't going to want to live in Allen County. Only people that are going to be there are the people that feel like they can't escape. Again, phone lines are open. We are kind of coming up to end. If anybody would like to get their voice heard, 718-717-8296. I'll take a call for the next minute or two. After that, I will not take any calls. I am working on getting things done in the studio that I will be moving everything to. And we'll be redoing my broadcast quite a bit and bringing back some exclusive interviews, which I was doing at the beginning of this broadcast. I was doing a lot of interviews, which I've had so much going on with family and friends. I've had to deal with quite a few deaths this year, which really kept me emotionally drained and pretty busy, and, you know, family and friends that are also having to deal with it, and then dealing with, I had a friend that passed away, which wasn't too long ago, and retrieving things from his place, from his family, and right now my grandma is currently in the hospital, which she is not doing too well, and I don't know if she's going to last too much longer. So I've been dealing with all this and trying to keep a level head while trying to console family too, and be there for everyone. I'm one of those people. I definitely kind of try to be there for a lot of people, and I definitely overextend myself sometimes and don't get enough sleep. But after get everything in the studio, definitely a lot of revamping going on with the broadcast. Things I'm going to start doing more of is interviews and more original content, which once I get in the studio, I will be doing some smaller projects that will also air on the broadcast. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know UCY is definitely working on some changes, which will be good for the listeners and the host on the network, which there are definitely great hosts out there. And I hope to continue to see UCY grow. If you're someone that is wanting to do a broadcast or are doing a broadcast but would like to see it on the UCY.TV broadcasting network, go to UCY.TV and scroll down, or it might be at the top now. But just look for the contact information and contact UCY and see if there is a spot open that you could get your broadcast on the air. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Great broadcast coming up right after this. Take care and thank you for joining me. Have a great weekend. UCY.TV.